Come with an open heart, and we will open our eyes and ears to you. Open your eyes and ears to us, and we will open our hearts to you. This is a place where we tell of our lives. This is a place where we share our dreams. We dream of a world in which we find a true home. We listen to the dreaming and practice the living and welcome all who weary of the desolate path where only one story is ever told. Here we share one story, but we bring countless stories of our own. We tell and we listen, so one story may welcome many, and so many may celebrate this one told by our gathering. Welcome, welcome. Our first hymn this morning is hymn number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth. Please join as you are willing and able.
For the beauty of the earth, for the splendor of the skies, for the love which from our birth over and around us lies. Source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the heart and mind's delight, for the mystic harmony, lake it sits to sound and sight. source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise for the wonder of each hour of the day and of the night. Hill and vale and tree and flower, sun and moon and stars of light, source of all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise for the joy of human care, sister, brother, parent, child, for the all to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise.
So welcome to the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge. That was Debbie. My name is Nathan. I'm one of your ministers. So glad that you're with us today. If you would like to have Joel place a stone in the chalice bowl, text 504-334-8034. If you're finding us for the first time, welcome. We don't normally do this, but we're in a pandemic. So glad you're with us. You have a very interesting opportunity today, if you're a member of the church. This is the first ever in the history of this church's online virtual congregational meeting. And we really, really need quorum at this because we're trying to elect new board members, new nominating committee members. There'll be some updates on some things, but that is at 11:15. You should have gotten an email. If you did not, email the office email address, or Allison. She's right now ready to respond to you for how to get you on at 11:15. The coffee hour will be after the congregational meeting. And we're going to try and do our flower ceremony next week. So what we need you to do is to take a picture of a flower and send it to the church office. Email it. Don't mail a flower to us. Look, we know this is weird. We're glad you're with us. We're going to get through this every week. We're going to keep doing what we're going to do. So today for our lesson, we had one of the children who grew up in this church offer the lesson. His name is Walter Silverman. Hope you'll enjoy.
Hi, my name is Walter Silverman. I'm here to talk about Earth Day and why it's important to me. And I made a list of some things you can do for Earth Day while you're home during quarantine. The first one is recycle. Recycling is important because if you throw something away, it will just go into a landfill, and that is bad, and it takes up more room and it pollutes more things. So when we recycle, our trash can be used for something else. The second one is use reusable bags when shopping. Now, using reusable bags is good because the plastic, if it ends up being dumped in a landfill, it can sometimes get into the ocean, and birds and fish and things can get caught in the plastic and they can die. So using reusable shopping bags is better.
So our video from Walt, I want you to see the whole thing. It's an important part of the service. So I am going to see if I can play it for you.
plastic, if it ends up being dumped in a landfill, it can sometimes get into the ocean, and birds and fish and things can get caught in the plastic and they can die. So using reusable shopping bags is better. The third one is plant a tree or garden. So if you plant a garden, you can get fruit and or vegetables from the garden, and you can save some fruit and vegetables at the store for people who might need it more than you. And then planting a tree gives like fresher oxygen to the planet. And then there's don't litter. Not littering is a big part of Earth Day. It's very much like recycling. If you just kind of throw your trash on the ground, it might pollute the waterways. So do not litter. And last but not least is use energy efficient light bulbs. Using energy efficient light bulbs saves more energy, so we can have more energy for longer, and we can save fuel so that we burn through less fuel. Here's some things. Now I'm going to talk about some things about why Earth Day is important to me. Earth Day is important to me because I spend a lot of time outside playing sports or going on Cub Scout campouts, and the outdoors are very fun to be in. Sometimes we like to stay inside a lot, and we like to play our video games or watch TV, but getting outside can be good too, so that you can take a break and you can just kind of relax. We want healthy air. Yeah, we want healthy air, and we want clean water, not polluted. So if you do a little bit on Earth Day, if everybody does a little bit, we can all do a lot. Thank you for letting me talk about Earth Day.
You can still text us with your request to place a stone, 504-334-8034. These stones we have here are held by this flaming chalice. We are together earthlings, made of earth, of air and water, fire, the energy of sunlight and stars. So we place these stones as earthlings to remember the power of working together to care for our earth and to care for one another. We remember how a community can reshape each of our lives through shared meaning, can reshape how humanity behaves through its shared meaning. By itself, to place a stone is just a physical act. But these stones, each one of them has a story. Joyful and light, perhaps, or heavy with worry, or sad, or maybe funny, or maybe stories we don't really understand yet. Placing stones together is a reminder of our power we have to shape this world and to care for each other. To remember that the truth of life is that none of us has to be in this world alone. Together, we are part of a greater story, a tale that is being told and will never be finished. These flowers this morning and this stone, in memory of Trudy Myers. There's a card we will send today to her children, Ben Myers, Sue Myers, Steve Myers, and David Myers. We will send a card to Wade Adams this morning. Condolences on the death of his Aunt Lola. A condolence card will go out to Alex Perlis and his family on the death of his mother. We're thinking this morning of Hugh Finkley and Ruth Arnett. Sending a get well card to Bruce Blaney. And a card of congratulation to Jaden Bryant. She was the first place winner of the National Writing Contest on healing colorism. She won for her poem, Pious Creole Belle. We place a stone, Gwen Pine and Steve Campo. A stone that everyone may have a good Earth Day. Appreciation for Zoom services. The Gidreys place a stone. Ed Benoit, happy birthday. For Vicki Berry. Patience, sustenance, survival. For Ed and Michaela. For Liz, a best friend. For Tiffany's mother, tested positive for COVID. For travelers. The past, present, and future ministry of this congregation. For Cameron, battling a fever and a cough. For Christy and Melanie Howard. For Lindsay and Jason Wesley, happy anniversary. For those with the virus. Holly's cousin Matt. For victims of violence, especially children. For family, friends, and staff in nursing homes. Josephine and John. Walter for Earth Day. We're working together, apart. And a stone for all of us here. May the stone and stones we've placed help us carry all the burdens that we carry alone and together. We light our chalice. With hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Light is a symbol of the power of love. From all that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace, goodwill on earth be sung, through every land, by every tongue.
The reading this morning is from The Telling by Ursula K. Le Guin. It's a science fiction novel. Leading up to this moment in the novel, an anthropologist from Earth has traveled to a newly discovered human planet. She's having a conversation with the religious leader of the planet's old religion, known as the Telling. She is struggling to understand the people of this planet, their culture, and their religion. She writes, whatever it was that she was trying to learn, the education she was trying to get, it was not a religion with a creed and a sacred book. It did not deal in belief. All the books were sacred. It could not be defined by symbols and ideas, no matter how beautiful, rich, and interesting the symbols and ideas. It was mostly, as far as she could see, just called the telling. As she listened to Elyad's tellings, she heard a disciplined, reasoned mind, although it spoke of what was unreasonable. So she asked, anything that's in the telling is equally important? Elyad considered. No, she said. Yes, it's all we have. It's the way we have the world. Without the telling, we don't have anything at all. The moment goes by like the water of the river. We would tumble and spin and be helpless if we tried to live in the moment. A baby can do it, but we would drown. Our minds need to tell. They need the telling. To hold. The past is past. There's nothing in the future to catch hold of. The future is nothing yet. How could anybody live there? So what we have is the words that tell what happened and what happens. We are not outside the world. We are the world. We are its language. So we live and it lives. Our next hymn is Mother Spirit, Father Spirit. Welcome, Debbie, again, and sing with us if you are willing and able.
The Spirit, where are you? In the sky song, in the forest, then a cry to give you what to call you, what am I? Many drops are in the ocean deep and wide. Sunlight bounces off the ripples to the sky. What to give you, what to call you, who am I? I am empty, time flies from me, what is time? Dreams eternal, fears infernal haunt my heart. What to give you, what to call you, oh my God. Mother Spirit, Father Spirit, take our hearts. Take our breath and let our voices sing our parts. Take our hands and let us work to shape our world.
I was an interim minister in upstate New York. Actually, it wasn't really upstate, it was northern New York. It was a 2-hour drive to upstate from northern New York. I was serving a congregation there, and one day my wife and I wanted to enjoy the beauty of spring in the northern Adirondacks. So we decided to go hiking in a nearby nature preserve. We dressed for the hike, long sleeves, long pants with the bottom of the pants tucked into the boots. Of course, we had bug spray, insect repellent on us. So we drove to the preserve, parked at the trailhead, and got out of the car and we started hiking down the trail. And we got about 25 yards into the trail when I suddenly noticed there's all of these bugs flying around my head. There was a lot of bugs. Now, I'd already sprayed myself with bug spray, so I figured, well, maybe I didn't spray enough. So I put some more on. Then we started hiking again. Maybe 25 more yards, maybe. This time it was worse. The bugs, there were literally like a cloud of bugs around my head, and they kept landing it on my hair. And I was like, I would wave my hands and they would go away, and I thought, this is crazy. So I got the bug spray and just put a whole bunch in my hand and wiped it in my hair. I figured, that'll get them. We started to hike again. The bugs didn't care about the bug spray. Immediately they came back, and I would wave my hand, because I could feel them on my hair. I'd wave my hands around, they'd go in a cloud around my head, and as soon as I stopped waving my hands, they would all go back on my head. I turned around to look at my wife, like, what is going on? And she looked at me in horror. I had like a carpet of bugs on my hair. We just ran back to the car. I ran as fast as I could, hoping that cloud of bugs wasn't going to be able to keep up with me. So we got back into the car, and my wife looked at me in horror. Fortunately, the bugs hadn't made it to the car. But I remembered that look of horror, and I admit I was glad for the look of horror, in part because it was a horrible experience, and secondly, because of what it represents. You know, the thing is, many of you may have felt a shiver of horrific recognition at the idea of a carpet of bugs on your head. That sympathy, those feelings that we have and that come out through our faces and our bodies and the way we express ourselves, when they're seen by others, others feel, they have a way of mirroring those same emotions in their own experience. In fact, scientific studies have shown we have something in our brains called mirror neurons. The mirror neurons have the ability to take our observations of others and replicate something of their experience in our own minds. It appears that we humans have evolved to be deeply connected with each other and indeed with the world around us. These mirror neurons are why and how some of the stories we tell become shared stories. So in our service last week, Nathan talked about how we understand our own lives and our own traumas by telling our individual stories and having them heard. Today we consider how we tell shared stories, the power of shared stories, and why shared stories are essential, especially on Earth Day. What is the shared story of the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge? What is the shared story of the United States? What is the shared story we have of this earth? Indeed, what will be the shared story of this pandemic?
So this next reading is by Ethan Field. He's a Unitarian Universalist who was a Peace Corps volunteer. His work was to teach physics at a high school for young women. In the time he lived there, Ethan saw two approaches to life. One approach was how the United States government's embassy did its business. The other approach was how Ethan lived as an American in rural Africa. He says, at the embassy, the answers to the questions of security, the question of security, is to build higher walls, more barbed wire, more guard dogs, more guns, more restricted access. In other words, if you isolate yourself as much as possible from your surroundings can't hurt you. Peace Corps' philosophy is a little different. We have neither the resources nor the communication networks to, quote, secure our homes. Moreover, separating ourselves from our community would be completely counter to the whole purpose of the Peace Corps, encouraging world peace and friendship through cross-cultural understanding. So instead of building walls of concrete, we build walls of people. I build relationships with my neighbors who watch my house when I'm away. I build trust with the guys at the bus stand who watch my back when I'm getting my bags off the bus. I build friendships with the people at the post office and the bank, ensuring that my money and mail are well cared for. By building these relationships, I create a web of safety around me. The same web of safety that protects all my friends and neighbors. By living like everyone else, few would ever want to harm me. And many would run to my aid if someone did.
My grandfather was a storyteller. He was born in 1892, before television, before radio, before movie theaters. So when he was growing up, people told each other stories. My grandfather loved to tell stories. He told a lot of stories. I like to listen to his stories. And I realized that his stories were part of a greater story than almost anyone on earth could tell. So I've been thinking about what would the greater story of this pandemic be? It's not told yet. There's still a story to be told, and it's going to take some time. But I have been reading about the last global pandemic, the one that happened in 1918 and 1919, 100 years ago now. My colleague Meg Riley wondered. Her family were storytellers also. They never talked about the pandemic. Indeed, my grandfather never talked about it either. Not a single story about that pandemic. And I've wondered about that since I learned about it. More Americans died from that flu and that pandemic 100 years ago than were killed in fighting the First World War, a war in which my grandfather also served. I never read about that history until 2002, when the SARS virus showed up. There were a couple reasons no one could talk about the pandemic. Part of the reason was that no one really knew what was going on except governments, because governments were censoring newspapers about when they would report on the pandemic. Our own government was concerned that reporting about the pandemic would hurt public morale and the soldiers' morale as they fought that First World War. So no one was allowed to report on it. In fact, the flu ended up with the name the Spanish flu because the only reporting allowed about it was about how it happened in Spain. So it appeared like it was only a Spanish flu, thus they called it the Spanish flu. That flu happened all over the world. It was a global pandemic. 1 out of 3 people in the United States got that flu. Shared stories matter, and the truth of those stories matters. It turns out that even collectively, we cannot remember the past until we can tell shared stories about it. It also matters how we tell those shared stories, even in the moment we're living in. So a president has declared that this pandemic is a medical war. We have to win it. You know, my colleague, Meg, points out that that is itself a problem. Anyone can get the coronavirus. But something about that virus is that most people don't get symptoms. They don't even know they have it. And there's a reason for that, because most people who get the virus, their immune system takes care of it. It doesn't overreact or underreact. You could say that most people's immune system simply says, no thanks, not here, go away. Some of us, though, are more vulnerable. And when vulnerable people get this virus, their immune systems, instead of just setting a healthy boundary, their immune systems go to war. They start fighting. An over-response. And then the big problems start to show up. The immune system begins to attack the body itself. So those with the virus, their immune system starts to damage their bodies. Many people who die from the virus die because their immune systems have fought a war instead of practicing a healthy boundary.
I'm thinking a lot about stories, and I think this will be a smooth transition, but let's see. What is the story that people are going to tell about this church and its people? The easiest pitch is, this is a story where everyone's going to show up to the congregational meeting so we can make quorum. But going a little deeper, are we going to be the church that helps literally save people's lives? Are we going to be the church, often we get by in this church. There's a lot of generous people in the church, and we don't have to be as rigid as maybe the situation demands right now, because there's enough generosity to kind of coat over some of the sloppiness of life. But, and in a time like this, your church needs support from you, financial and spiritual. So I'm not asking you to give extraordinarily. I'm asking you to give the pledge that you said you would pay. And I'm asking you to give, if you are able, to people who are not able to make it through this pandemic. I mean it. If you get groceries delivered, try tip $20 or $25. I mean, something that feels extreme. Ignore the 10%, 20%. Really think about the people who whose work, usually underpaid, is making your life possible. And if you were one of the people who works in that system, or a family member that works in that system, be real generous with your forgiveness and your patience and your compassion. So I will ask you to give very generously. You can go on the church's website and find a whole list of ways that you can give. But let's tell a story that this church is the church that helped make this world better. This morning's offering is now given and received.
Communion Circle by Reverend Mark L. Valentini. The Earth, one planet, round global, so that when you trace its shape with your finger, you end up where you started. It's one, it's whole. All of the dotted lines we draw on our maps of this globe are just that, dotted lines. They smear easily. Oceans can be crossed. Even deserts can be crossed. The grain that grows on one side of the border tastes just as good as the grain on the other side of the border. Moreover, bread made from rice is just as nourishing to the body and spirit as bread made from corn or spelt or teff or wheat or barley. There is no superior land, no chosen site, no divine destiny falling on any one nation who draws those.
So one of the things that happens with the internet is not everyone's cameras work. So I'm going to finish it. Moreover, bread made from rice is just as nourishing to body and spirit as bread made from corn or spelt or teff or wheat or barley. There is no superior land, no chosen site, no divine destiny falling on any one nation who draws those dotted lines just so. There's only one earth we all share, we, the living, with all else that lives and does not live. Everything, everything, for good or ill, is part of the shared whole. Sky, earth, song, and words.
Sometimes the world of nature can be terrible. There are pandemics, other difficulties that come from what we call the natural world. Many of our European ancestors would describe nature as something that was not human and was in an eternal war with us. The natural world was called red in tooth and claw, and somehow humans were meant to be above it. Well, not to deny our experiences at all, but there is a problem when we tell the story of the earth and our place in it as if we're in a war. It hasn't been serving us well. We look at the future, and as we go to war against the world, we diminish it. And eventually we diminish our own places in it. This is why the lesson that Walter Silverman offered us this morning is so important. In the story of the earth, life's not sustained by war, it's sustained by connection. It's our seventh principle. The seventh principle of Unitarian Universalism. To cherish the interconnected web of which we are all part. Life didn't evolve out of war, it evolved out of the way things are interconnected. It evolved out of cooperation. It evolved out of mutuality. Life evolved out of a series of relationships. We know this. So, you know this crazy story about me hiking in the woods and all the bugs coming to turn my hair into a carpet of crawly bugs? A couple of days later in the Adirondacks, I told this story to a woman I know who did a lot of hiking. She laughed a little bit and she said, "So do you use Herbal Essence shampoo?" I had to think about that for a minute, and I realized, yeah, I do. She said, "No, you can't use that shampoo if you want to go hiking because the bugs love it. You'll have to use something else." The insecticide wasn't going to protect me from the carpet of bugs on my head. If I wanted to hike, I needed not to be an attractive nuisance. I needed to be in a better relationship with the earth. And really, that's part of what makes Walter's lesson so important. How are we going to tell the greater story? We're going to be at war. It won't help. We want to save ourselves and save this earth. As difficult and challenging as that can be, we have to do it through deep connection, mutual respect. Our shared story should be a story about how each of us is wearing masks for one another. It should be a story about how we all heeded the wisdom of science. Our shared story should be one in which we talk about the small ways in which we have helped one another survive, and the larger ways of understanding that we are indeed part of this natural world, and our survival depends on our understanding this scientific and religious truth. As Walter reminded us this morning, if everybody does a little bit, we can all do a lot. Our hymn this morning is Blue Boat Home. I invite you to sing with me this time. Though below me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains and plains, far away from the rolling ocean, still my dry land heart can say, I've been sailing all my life now, never harbor or port have I known, the wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. Sun, my sail, and moon, my rudder, as I ply the starry sea, leaning over the edge in wonder, casting questions into the deep, drifting here with my ship's companions, all we kindred pilgrim souls, making our way by the lights of the heavens, and our beautiful blue boat home. I give thanks to the waves upholding me, hail the great winds urging me on, greet the infinite sea before me, sing the sky my sailor song. I was born upon the fathoms, never harbor or port have I known, the wide universe is the ocean I travel, and the earth is my blue boat home. The words of our benediction were written by the COVID-19 Community Response Team in Upper Springfield, Ireland. When you go out and see the empty streets, the empty stadiums, the empty train platforms, don't say to yourself, it looks like the end of the world. What you are seeing is love in action. What you're seeing in that negative space is how much we do care for each other, for our grandparents, for our parents, our brothers and sisters, protecting people we will never meet. People will lose their jobs over this. Some will lose their businesses. Some will lose their lives. All the more reason to take a moment when you're out on your walk or on your way to the store or just watching the news to look into the emptiness and marvel at all of that love. Let that love fill and sustain you. It isn't the end of the world. It is the most remarkable act of global solidarity we may ever witness. Go in peace. Be in peace.